Thank you so much for coming to ZenPreneur, Mado and Lily. It's my pleasure to have you here today. How are you doing?
Wonderful. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks so much for having us.
My pleasure. May I ask where you are right now, in what part of the world?
Sure, I'm zooming in from Baltimore, Maryland.
Okay.
And I live in Asheville, North Carolina. So Lily and I are both on the same time zone, but not close enough to see each other in person. We've only met in person one time.
I see. And what's right now for you, it's 8 a.m. Is that correct?
9 a.m.
9 a.m. 9 a.m. Okay, good.
Where are you located?
I am on the other side of the world. I'm talking to you from Bangkok right now, Thailand. So here it's 8 p.m. So I know it was a little bit of a challenge, to find the right timing. But I'm glad that we made it, and I'm so happy to be with you. And maybe we can start the interview. Maybe we start with Mado, and then we continue with Lily. If you can please let us know for the listeners, um, who are you? What's the work that you do? And we can maybe take it from there.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. My name is Mado. I'm the host of the Yoga Teacher Resource podcast for the last 6 years, I think. And before that, I was a full-time yoga teacher. I've been teaching for 20 years. And there came a time where I realized that the drop-in class hustle was never going to be sustainable for me and for anybody, really. But I made it my mission and a project to figure out, well, what are the ways that teaching yoga can be sustainable? And so part of that was a project of interviewing 100 yoga teachers. And as those conversations went on, I just loved talking to yoga teachers. Like it just lit me up and it fed me. And I felt like I could do it forever. And so that's how the podcast was born. I was like, how can I keep talking to yoga teachers and keep supporting them? And that's how I started the podcast. So since then, I've been creating and co-creating continuing education programs for yoga teachers, including Retreat Roadmap, which I collaborated with Lily on.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. I love that part of having conversations with yoga teachers. What a great experience, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And how about you, Lily? What do our listeners need to know about you?
Well, I began teaching yoga in 2006, and I'm originally from an island near Seattle, but I went to UC Berkeley and kind of like tapped into this rich community of performing arts, healing arts, somatic arts in the California Bay Area, and just fell in love and stayed there. I worked as a professional modern dancer and a yoga teacher throughout my 20s. I was also a massage therapist. I lived in Germany for a year and worked on an artist visa as a dancer and taught yoga there. And most recently, I've been teaching yoga in Baltimore for the past decade. And I think for me, my business really shifted in 2020 with the pandemic from just kind of falling by default into working for studios as an independent contractor when I was teaching yoga to realizing that I could create my own online business. And so, yeah, I currently teach mostly virtually. I have an online studio. I teach 3 live stream classes each week. I have students from all over the country, all over the world in these classes. And I teach an online prenatal yoga teacher training. I teach in-person retreats, of course, about 3 times a year, sessions, like little series that I put together for local students and private clients. And I met Mado. Well, actually, I first met Mado because I am a huge fan of her podcast. And then I reached out to Mado once my business, how I was showing up to do the work I was doing really shifted with the pandemic. I reached out to Mado because I think I had been in just sort of winging it and like inventing the foundation of my business as a yoga teacher working at studios. And then I realized, wow, if I'm doing everything on my own, I need to have solid business practices in place. So I reached out to Mado. I did a few months of coaching with her, and then our relationship sort of grew from there. Like, yeah, Mado is a student in my live stream classes. We talk almost every day. I get a lot of like informal kind of coaching and business guidance from her. We created a course called Retreat Roadmap, which I'm sure we'll talk about later together. And now we get to travel the world together. Mado and I got to meet in person for the first time on a retreat that I led this March in Mexico. Yeah, it was like we met up on a tropical paradise island when we met for the first time. And we'll meet again in just like 2 months in Greece. So yeah.
Wow, wonderful.
Mm.
And yes, it seems like 2020, that was such a huge shift for so many yoga teachers, including myself. And yeah, that's an interesting conversation, but maybe we have the conversation another day, because today we want to dig into retreats, because I know you do retreats. I know this is something also you support other teachers with. And here at the podcast at ZenPreneur, we talk a lot also about retreats, and this is one of my favorite topics. So tell me, maybe we start with Lily and then we continue with Mado, so we kind of alternate. So Lily, tell me, why do you think retreats are a good way to share with other people, to share your knowledge, to share your wisdom?
I think when you share yoga on a retreat, you get your students fullest quality of attention. They've consciously unhooked from the kind of hustle and grind back home, some of their duties, their like how people label them, the identities they wear back home. And they just show up differently for their yoga practice on retreat. My kids are in summer camp this summer, like a lot. As a working mom, it's always a struggle to to find time and space to work in the summer. So we have like a trip to Italy as a family. We're going to go do some retreat recon together in Italy. But in between that, they're in summer camp. And the other day I was driving them to camp, and my oldest one said in the car, "I just want to exist." And I feel like there's such wisdom in this. Like, I just want to exist. This sense of like some unstructured time, some being rather than just doing. And for children, this is like, a little dose of boredom inspires generative creativity, where you like invent a song or a game, or you make a new friend or an imaginary friend or whatever that might be. And I think similarly, on retreat, there's this generative spaciousness, this emptiness away from our duties and responsibilities back home. So people kind of strip away some of that. In like Buddhism, there's this concept of shunyata, which is emptiness, but an emptiness that is like generative, that is a combination of space and consciousness, like the radiance of our conscious awareness. And those are sort of two of the ingredients that merge on a retreat, are people having space because they've deliberately set something down, and they're able to shine that spotlight of their attention into their yoga. So I think for the students, they're able to gain a rich perspective into a wholeness of who they are that they might not have access to when they're in their habit mind and their habit body, in their routines back home. It's a perspective mentally and emotionally that people get, but it's also, of course, the body and mind are so interconnected. So it's also the way people show up physically in their practice. They have big transformations on a retreat, doing 2 yoga practices of, maybe 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon. After 3 days of this, a lot of the habitual patterning and strain that pulls the body in certain ways, can start to open, and people get new perspective of how they occupy their body, as well as new perspective that they can bring to their life back home. So I think it's just such a gift to share yoga in this way, to have your students' full attention. And people bring this home with them. It's like people think I go on a yoga retreat to escape my life, but really you go on the retreat and you realize that maybe you're escaping a little bit with the routine way you do things back home, and you drop into a deeper sense of presence. It's a beautiful way to build community, to share the practice. And then, of course, people bring that back into their lives back home when they return. So it continues to unfurl and unfold.
I love that. It creates like some sort of container that it's like perfect for that kind of transformation, isn't it?
Yeah.
What do you think, Mado? What are your thoughts? Why do you think it's a good way?
Yeah, I absolutely love what you said, Lily. That was so beautifully put. And I think from the other side of things, I mentioned earlier the hustle of the drop-in class and the lifestyle that many yoga teachers find themselves in, of running from one class to another, never knowing how many students are going to be there, who's going to be there. And then you end up kind of teaching to the least experienced students in the room. Like, you want to include the least experienced students in the room. But I have talked to so many yoga teachers who find themselves feeling like they can never quite penetrate into the depths of what they've experienced through yoga in their public drop-in classes. And the retreat container is like the complete opposite of that. It's like the same people multiple days in a row who have made a commitment to being there and to stepping away from the responsibilities of their daily life and to focus more deeply on their yoga. So as a teacher, I think it's a very rewarding format for teaching that kind of helps to reignite the fire of why we love teaching in the first place, why we love yoga in the first place. So we'll talk later, I think, about how teaching retreats is a financially sustainable format, but it's also a creatively sustainable format because it really allows you to step into your potential as a teacher in a way that the limitations of the drop-in format kind of limit you from.
Yeah, I agree. And, I agree with you, Mado. I think there is something special. There is like some sort of magic that is created when you are into the retreat. And as the retreat leader or as the teacher, is like something happened there. It's like some sort of magic. I don't know how to explain, but yeah, I think it's really, really powerful. And maybe you touched a little bit about on this already, Mado, but what do you think? Would like to dig a little bit deeper with you. If you can tell me, what do you think are the benefits of including retreats as part of your offerings as a yoga teacher or as a wellness facilitator? What do you think are those main benefits?
Well, I talked about sustainability, and I think there's a lot of angles to sustainability. One of them is relationship, where as yoga teachers, we are not the same as like a tire place, for example, where people are going to go to the tire place that is closest to their house. The yoga teacher's business is supported by long-term relationships with their students, and retreats allows you to accelerate the trust that you build with your students and to build a history with them of peak experiences that they'll never forget. So it brings sustainability into your business, not just in a financial sense, but also in a broader sense of having these people in your community that trust you deeply and have had positive transformational experiences that you facilitated, and they'll never forget that. So I think the three things that really come to my mind are that the relationship, what I already mentioned about the ability to explore more nuanced teachings with your students that they might not have been ready for in a drop-in format, and then earning an actual livable income, which is not easy, as we know as yoga teachers. It is not easy to build a business model that allows you to pay your bills, allows you to save for retirement, and allows you to not always feel like you are kind of scrambling to avoid a disaster that would make the whole house of cards come tumbling down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So retreats, the two business models that people have found work best because people are more invested in the experience and they invest actual money in the experience of retreats and teacher trainings. Mm. But when you look at the two together, the amount of work that goes into a teacher training versus the amount of work that goes into a retreat, the retreats are actually make more sense from a financial perspective. They are work. I mean, I don't want to like lead people astray and act like they're a walk in the park, but to responsibly put on a teacher training is a whole different level of endeavor, whereas the investment is similar. So, you know, for many yoga teachers, it's going to be a combination of things that creates a sustainable living, but certainly offering 1 to 2 to 3 retreats a year can be a cornerstone of having a yoga business that pays you fairly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. And I also believe it's like a kind of a great offering as long as it is well priced, because I also see many yoga teachers. There are many retreats out there these days, and it's great, you know, because that means that people want to travel and people want to go. But I've seen in my experience, I've seen many yoga teachers that they don't make it financially speaking with retreats, because also there is a little bit of, I think, a lack of understanding of, as you mentioned, Mado, all the work that involves everything, all the work that requires, and then pricing it in a way that allows you to have that sustainability. Maybe we pass it over to Lily. Lily, what do you think are some of the benefits?
I mean, I can speak from my own perspective because my business is at this point mostly online. Like most of my students that I teach in my 3 live stream classes don't live near me. I have this morning a student in France, a student in Spain, Mado in North Carolina, people in New York, people all over. So I think having a retreat is a really smart way if you also are a yoga teacher who has pivoted to an online business to create a meeting point. It's like the most perfect way to meet up with all these virtual students who live all over the globe or all over the country, and to form community in person and have those connections and provide the hands-on adjustments and really, you know, be able to walk around them when they're in a pose instead of looking at the little Zoom screen. So yeah, I think also from my perspective, I have clients, I have students in a lot of different parts of the world, even when I was teaching in physical locations. So if there are other yoga teachers listening to this podcast who have not always taught in one spot, right? Like I taught, I don't know, almost a decade in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I still have a lot of students there. And then I taught for 1 year in Berlin in Germany, and I have students there. And I grew a newsletter in each place, which we recommend that all yoga teachers do, like gather the emails of your students, if that's okay with the studio where you teach. So I have these lists and I have these communities in San Francisco Bay Area, in Berlin, Germany, and now for the past decade in Baltimore. And it's just really, it's like the perfect way to create a little meeting point for people. So in that way, I think the two feed in, you know, then people maybe who haven't taken my class before go on a retreat and they want to study with me online afterwards to keep the good energy going. So it really, it's like a business model that just makes a lot of synergy sense to me. I wholeheartedly agree with what Mado said as well. I think if you are running your own business as a yoga teacher, of course, yoga teacher training and retreats are the two, you know, best ways to like actually earn a livable wage instead of just teaching drop-in classes, you know, series membership, things like that. And I mean, from kind of a perspective for both the teacher and the student, I think it's just so deeply transformative. Like being away from your home routine and being able to really connect with your students. It's always transformative for me as well. I come home with new insights in my life and in my path. And I learned so much from being in a foreign culture and learning about their healing traditions. And of course, I think so many of us, the students, but also you as a yoga teacher, can be a little disconnected from nature, from community. And so gathering in this immersive way in a retreat where not only are you practicing together, but you're eating meals together and maybe going on a hike together or an adventure together. It's really beautiful for both you as a teacher, but also, of course, for your students.
Mm-hmm. I
I just had another thought, actually, as Lily was speaking. When I was talking about the teacher trainings and the retreats, I think a lot of yoga teachers have been pushed into leading teacher trainings before they were really ready because of this issue of financial sustainability. And the thing about a retreat is you do not need a specific amount of experience to facilitate a retreat. You can learn how to be an amazing retreat leader by leading retreats. Like, you have to do it. You have to start before you're ready with retreats. Whereas with teacher trainings, I think it's incredibly important to have decades of practice and decades of teaching under your belt before you start a teacher training. And so I think that if more yoga teachers would bring retreats into their retreat business versus starting a teacher training before they're really ready, I think that would benefit the entire industry and the entire community of yoga practitioners in the world.
Yes, yes. And I completely agree with you there, Mado, because the level of depth, I mean, there are different level of depths that you have between a retreat and a teacher training, but a retreat, I can see it's more like a kind of being together, learning, but it's also, there is a lot of space for enjoyment, for making connections, for having fun. And for me, like in my experience, when I've been teaching retreats, the moment I was teaching the retreat was the moment I was having the most fun. Like, I felt like it was so much work preparing towards the retreat. You know, once you're there, it's kind of easy peasy, so to speak, you know. But a teacher training is a different story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think as yoga teachers, we tend to get kind of serious in general. We take yoga very seriously.
Yeah.
And one thing I love about retreats is an invitation to set that down. Because when you dive into the actual teachings of yoga, there's nothing about it that says you have to be serious all the time. I mean, there's like this concept of Leela, of like this divine play that in the day-to-day of our lives, it's hard to access that. But on retreat, it's almost, it's just there. And it's like the veil thins and you can access that divine play and that experience of joy and delight and levity that sometimes feels so very far away at home.
Yeah. And I think, like, I'll add to that it's an immersion, right? Like, the last retreat that Mado came on with me in Mexico, over half of the people who were there were yoga teachers, but they chose to come on a retreat instead of a yoga teacher training. So I think the retreat can appeal both to yoga teachers, but also to yoga students who, I think a lot of yoga students want to sign up for a yoga teacher training, not because they want to necessarily teach yoga, but because they love the practice of yoga and all the ways it's opened doors for them in their hearts, in their lives, in their bodies. And they want that immersion. And I think a retreat, if it's a yoga retreat, I mean, I see some retreats out there that are like 60-minute poolside, like, 45-minute yoga and then like adventure travel the whole time. And I think these are different things. Like, they're different, but a yoga retreat can be immersion. It can, like Mado said, invite more nuanced aspects of yoga practice and give people that container where maybe they're not practicing teaching skills, but they're taking a deep dive into yoga. And I think that can appeal both to yoga teachers, but also to those students who are looking for immersion. And sometimes they sign up for teacher training because of that. The other thing, Mado, you can like totally correct me with all this because I'm not remembering the exact exercise, but I did this year-end challenge, like year-end planning challenge with Mado. And when you were talking about Lila, I thought of this because, okay, you're going to have to correct me, Mado, because I have just like a vague memory, but there's a scale of profit, joy, interest from your students. I forget exactly what the metrics were, but you put your offerings on this, like what brings in a lot of profit for you, what feels so joyful for you, what do your students want from you, what are they signing up for in big numbers, you know? And when I did this exercise, oh my goodness, out of all the things I do, teacher training, private, what else, series, challenges, online membership, prenatal teacher training, all these things, I put it all on the grid and I was like, whoosh, retreats are just like a big, there's like levity, there's playfulness, there's lightness, there's desire from my community, big time, there's profit. Like it just was such a no-brainer. And I wouldn't have seen that connection had I not put it on that grid. But Mado, you can clarify what the grid is, because I might be not saying exactly the right thing.
Yeah, you create a matrix with your offerings and you basically determine where they fall on this range from profitable to basically seva or no breaking even, right? Or even maybe costing you money on one end, to being the things that bring in the most income on the other end. And then with the other side of the scale, the other axis of the matrix, you rate them on like how fun they are for you, basically, how much you enjoy teaching them. So on the one end, you have the things that like on one corner, right? That upper right corner would be the offerings that bring in the most money and the most joy. And then on the bottom left would be the offerings that are neither joyful nor bring in income. Now, hopefully you don't have any or many of those. Usually your offerings are going to fall somewhere along that matrix, but for me, I'm a very visual person. And so it helps me to map things out because I just get a different hit, like Lily was talking about, where it's like, yeah, on some level, I know that my retreats are both joyful and profitable. But when I'm like comparing them on this very specific scale to everything else I'm doing, I can really see like, wow, they blow everything else out of the water, right?
Yeah. Yes, I love that, Mado, and I'm sure our listeners are gonna be able to see that double metric, because I think it makes a lot of sense. And of course, like we want, when you're running a business, you want things to hopefully be profitable, but also give you joy. And I like to also touch into a couple of things that Lily mentioned before. One of them is that, Lily, you kind of touch on this like very lightly, but I think it's actually very important. We are recording this interview in 2024. We've been coming from 2020 when, as we mentioned before, we were all required to either be online or you don't do anything. But now we are in a time where I think we do have the tools. People are much more familiar with the tools of technology, and we do have access to that. Like, if regardless of the level of income that you have as a yoga teacher, you're gonna be able to afford a phone, you're gonna be able to afford a computer, and that is gonna give you access to so many people. But also, I think this year, and from now onwards, I hope so it goes that way, but I think people also are craving to be in person. So I think the perfect combination for anyone, for a yoga teacher, for a wellness practitioner, I think the perfect combination is to have a little bit of both, to have that online ability to be working with people in some capacity, but also to be able to also take them on a retreat, basically, and be in person with them. Yeah. Hello, my friend. Sawadee krap from the land of smiles. This is one of my favorite countries in the world. It's like my second home. This is Thailand. And I would like to take this opportunity to invite you to spend some time together with me in my upcoming business bootcamp in Koh Samui. in an island, beautiful tropical island in the south of Thailand, in a wonderful place, which is my spiritual cove, called Samahita Retreat. This business bootcamp will happen in April 2025. So if you are watching this video before 2025, you're still in time to sign up. We're gonna be talking about how to build and how to grow a heart-centered business. And we're gonna do this together with a community of heart-centered entrepreneurs in a wonderful place. Honestly, Samahita, Koh Samui, it's a place close to my heart, and I can tell you, it's one of the most transformative and beautiful places in the world. So, if you have been gaining some value from my content and you would like to have an in-person, unforgettable experience with me and a group of like-minded people, check out the links in the description of this video. Check out for ZenPreneur Biz Bootcamp, or just DM me in some of my social media and I will connect with you and give you the link for signing up. This is going to be epic. You don't want to miss it. And I really, really hope to see you there. Okay, my friend, that's all for today. Khop kun krap. That's something that I would agree. And also the other thing that I like to talk about, Lily, to what you said before, it's about yoga teachers. This is very interesting because we think yoga teachers may not be able to, may not want to go on a retreat, but actually in my experience, I have run retreats and I had yoga teachers coming, not because they wanted to even become professional yoga teachers, because I was surprised, you know, when I've been working for places where they were doing continuing education, or when I've been collaborating with such places, my expectation was that 90% of the people there would want to make a career out of yoga, but it's actually not like that. It's like usually it's a very small percentage of us doing those teacher training that then, you know, have in mind that we want to continue into that path, professionally speaking. Is that your experience as well?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that if there was a clearer path to having a career as a yoga teacher, more people would do it. What I've seen is a lot of people starting a teacher training kind of unsure whether they want to teach professionally or not. And by the end or within a few years, recognizing that the path to making a true living, actually paying their bills teaching yoga, is more work than they want, that they would rather just keep their job or go back to school for another career that has a clearer path forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, let's go into the next question, because we were talking before about, you know, there are all of the benefits, of course, and I am, you know, pro teaching retreats. I love how you say, Mado, before that, you know, the best way to learn retreats is to just go there and teach them, because this is kind of one of the best learning process that you can have. But I'm sure you can tell me, because I know you work with a lot of yoga teachers, and I'm sure you can tell me what are the biggest struggles that you see on the average yoga teacher or aspiring retreat leader when they plan a retreat? What are those struggles that you see?
Yeah, great question. The first one is just getting started. The first one is just starting. Imposter syndrome is real, and it tends to come up in a really strong way whenever there's a bigger project. So I see a lot of yoga teachers who feel a spark of desire to run retreats, but they never get started because either they don't know what the first step is, or they're concerned that they're not going to get the first step right? That they're not going to do it exactly right, or they're worried that they're not going to be able to fill the retreat. And I think, first of all, it's important to understand, like we were just talking about, that you have to do it in order to learn how to do it right. So it's okay to do it imperfectly. It's okay to have your first retreat not fill up. It's okay to have your first retreat not even make a profit, as long as you can kind of put it in perspective and recognize it as a learning experience, that you have this long range view in mind. But you have to get started. And in order to get started in a way that sets you up for the most success, it's important to choose the type of retreat that best aligns with your current student base. So if you are a relatively new teacher and most of your students are like young folks who are just getting started in their careers, or people with children, and then for your first retreat, you shoot it out of the park for an international retreat, you're not setting yourself up for success. So especially for those who are experiencing imposter syndrome, especially for those who are nervous about whether or not they're going to fill their retreats, it's important to start smaller, build the confidence, build the skill set, and recognize that this is a very, or can be a very sustainable business model, but you have to have the long view in mind. It doesn't work for a brand new yoga teacher to launch with 4 international retreats a year, right? You have to build that community. You have to build those relationships. But if you start slowly and you really meet people where they are and you deliver a stellar experience, those people are going to grow with you, and their confidence in you is going to grow as your confidence in yourself grows. So that's the first one, is just starting and facing your imposter syndrome in the eye and saying, I'm going to do it anyway. The second one is pricing. I don't know why, but pricing is like the biggest freeze moment for a lot of yoga teachers. And I was actually thinking about why, as you sent these questions ahead of time, and I was like, why is this? And I think partly it's because a lot of those yoga teachers don't have the funds to pay for a retreat. So then they're really frozen as far as what would other people pay. I can't pay this. So how can I figure out what other people would pay? And I think that it's important to test out what other people would pay, but that's not the first question to ask yourself. If that's the first question to ask yourself, you are going to freeze, because it's like, first, who are we talking about? Who are these people? If you don't have a specific person in mind, you don't know how much that person's going to be able to or willing to pay. So the first thing you need to do is decide, who is this for? What is their financial situation? What do they want? Like, what really calls to them? What excites them? And where do they want to go? Once you have that, then you need to do a bunch of research and find expenses and figure out, how much is this going to cost? How much is every penny that I'm going to need to put into this going to be? And at first you're going to miss things because you don't know what you don't know, and that's okay. But over time, you're going to build a comprehensive spreadsheet or list or system for creating your pricing, so that you can then decide, what do you need to make in order to make this worthwhile? Add that to the cost of what you need to put out, and then look at the price that you're left with. You also have to kind of decide, how many people do I think I could attract? So it's complicated. It's like multidimensional. It's much more complicated than a matrix, right? But ultimately, the point is that you need to find the price first and then ask yourself, would people pay this? Right? Because if you just start with, how much would people pay, you don't even know what you're offering yet. It's just going backwards. So you have to start first with, what am I offering? What's included? Where is it? What do I need to make? And then you look at that number and you ask yourself, is this viable? Would my people pay this? And if you don't know, you can ask people, or you can even just run the experiment, launch it and see, do they pay? If you launch it and nobody signs up and everybody's telling you it's too expensive, well, you got your answer. But you can't pick the perfect price. There's no perfect price for everybody. And you can't pick your price based on what you think people will pay. You can only create the offering and then feel into it. So it is a lot of extra work up front. I mean, that's the truth of it. You have to put in the research to create the offering, to know the price, and then you can test out, will people pay for this or not? So that's
Mado,
the second. Yeah, of course.
I know you probably have so many more gems to share, but just as you're talking about pricing, Mado and I led a workshop on, it was like an hour-long workshop called Thriving as a Retreat Leader. And one of the pieces that we spoke on in this workshop was pricing. And one of the questions we got from, there were like over 200 people that signed up for this, was, how do you price a retreat? Like, do you get those rack rates and then you increase it by like 20%? Does that feel fair? And I just had this moment where I was like, and it's that freeze that Mado is referencing. Like, people just want an easy answer. They don't want to dig in and excavate the whole lattice of like, what is the expense for you to get there? My goodness, if you only increase by 20%, you might not even cover your expenses to be on that retreat. You might be paying to lead a retreat. So you have to think about your expenses. You have to like put each little line on a calculator. And this is a resource we have inside of Retreat Roadmap, that there's like a whole spreadsheet with formulas already in, so you can get like, what is the expense to be on the ground leading this retreat? And then a separate line item is, what is your fee per person for leading this retreat? I just think a lot of yoga teachers do kind of like freeze up around pricing. I'll add to that also, like, do market research, not just with like your students, like, would you pay this, but also look at what other people in your region are charging for a yoga retreat and bounce your number off that. Or look at what some of these big corporate, retreat outfitters, concierge services are charging for a retreat. And that's usually going to be way inflated. I mean, I look at those rates as a solo entrepreneur and they're like $1,000 to $2,000 more than what I'm charging, because they have a lot more overhead, because they have like administrative staff, and they're also usually they're paying their yoga teachers so poorly. I think when people freeze around retreats, they often turn to those concierge services and they're like, just do it for me. But it's like, if you do it on your own, you can earn, 10 times what you would earn per person, like with a concierge service. So I just wanted to like wrap that into the little piece where you're talking about pricing, Mado. Sorry to interrupt your flow.
No. And Lily mentioned this workshop that we taught together. We normally charge $27 for it, but we do want to offer it to your listeners for free. So I will talk about how to get access to that at the end. So thanks for mentioning that, Lily. Yeah. So the third hang up, the third roadblock or challenge that comes up over and over is around marketing and sales. And I think, again, there's this sense of, there's so many different options. I feel overwhelmed. I don't know what works. And one of the reasons that Lily and I created Retreat Roadmap together is that when she came to me for help with her business, we went through all the different aspects of her business, but we really went through, part of that was her retreat business. And so we came up with a whole new system for running retreats, all different angles of it, but part of it was the marketing and the sales. And the results of that were so effective that we were like, oh my gosh, we really need to share this, because I think this is a piece that a lot of yoga teachers are missing, is psychology around sales psychology. We are all bombarded with messages all the time. Buy this, sign up for that, do this. Even freebies, we've become even jaded with freebies these days, right? So what cuts through the noise? What gets people's attention? What causes them to take action? And when you understand these components of sales psychology, then you give your retreat the best chance of success. You can have the most beautiful location, the most in-depth practices, but if you can't communicate that to your community in a way that cuts through the noise, then your retreat it's like crippled. It's handicapped. It's like you put like big concrete boots on your retreat. So there's a few components that I won't get into too much detail in. We do go into them inside Retreat Roadmap. But one is knowing what they desire. And market research, Lily mentioned the word market research a few times. This is also kind of confusing to yoga teachers. We have a bonus video about market research and Said Retreat Roadmap as well, but it's about having curious conversations with the people in your community with the intent to understand them and what they want, what motivates them. So you need to know what they desire. You have to have their trust, and that's something that most yoga teachers already have in place. So that's a leg up that most yoga teachers have over like a big corporation or something like that. You need to have the right timing. So if you are launching a retreat in a hot place in the middle of summer, again, you're putting concrete boots on your retreat. So you need to understand timing. If folks want to hear more about timing, they can listen to my podcast episode I did with Lily all about retreat timing. And we even created like a retreat timing guide that will be in the show notes for that one. So you need to understand timing. Then you also need to understand urgency and scarcity. Now, when we talk about urgency and scarcity, a lot of yoga teachers, like, they start to shudder, right? Because these are terms that sound manipulative. And what is important to understand is that they only work when people are already interested in your retreat. Urgency and scarcity are not going to get somebody who is like, I don't know who you are, I have no desire to go on your retreat, to sign up for it. So it's not like a magic wand, and it's not something that is unethical. It is an invitation for people who are already interested to take action now. Urgency means that there's some reason, urgency and scarcity kind of go hand in hand, but basically it is tapping into the fact that this is not something that's going to be around forever. And with Lily, one of the things that we found works really well is the fact that at most retreats, you have a variety of different rooms. And if you want a specific type of room, there's scarcity around that. So you need to sign up early if you want a specific type of room. So that's one example. And that's like a natural, genuine scarcity. It's not manipulative, but it does get people to take action. So, and then finally, there's social proof. And this is how your business will grow over time. One of the things that happens with Lily's retreats is that she's been filling them sooner and sooner. And so people see that happening on social media, and she's very wise to announce the progress as they fill. She makes sure to share that with her community. And so people see, oh, if I want to go on a retreat with Lily, I can see people are signing up. They're like sharing their memories from past retreats. So there's this social proof that combines with the urgency and the scarcity. And so you can see how this sort of builds over time into a system of marketing and sales where it's not stressful for Lily to launch a retreat. She knows that it's going to fill up because she has this past experience and she has all of these different components of sales psychology in place in her ecosystem. So those are the three where people really get stuck. And of course, there are many, many more. One of the things that Lily and I have done this year is we've launched a retreat mentorship, a retreat leader mentorship, which has been so fun. We just got started. We had our first session, and we had one of the participants who had a retreat that was only half full, hadn't met her minimum, was going to need to move venues. And, you know, it had just been kind of lingering like this for quite some months, and she was getting worried. And it's the middle of summer, not the best time to promote a retreat. And Lily and I were able to give her several action steps, and within 1 week, she had the retreat completely full. So
Wow.
that was like, it really shows the power of like the customized advice, right? You can listen to all the podcasts, you can take all the courses, but sometimes you just need somebody to look at your situation and say, this is what you need to do, somebody from the outside. So that's been really fun. And I just mentioned that to say that, like, yeah, everybody gets stuck in different places, and you can have all the knowledge, all the tools, and all the techniques, but you need to also have the system in place for taking action on what you know.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, Mado, I love one thing that you mentioned, especially at the beginning, and it's that I see, in my experience, I also see, talking with retreat leaders, they tell me, Manu, there is so much out there, there are so many retreats out there. And it's true, like if you go to retreat websites, book yoga retreats, or if you go to some Facebook retreat groups, you can see that there is a lot out there. But for me, it's like the other day I was reading this article that was published in Forbes, and it says that, the wellness, traveling, the tourism industry, it's predicted to grow like a lot. It's going to be like exploding over the next few years. And while it is true that there are so many retreat leaders offering retreats out there, and many of them look the same, but it's because they haven't been doing all of that process you were mentioning, Mado, of understanding who are their people, what are they looking for, and then also how to frame that in a way and how to put that into words into a way that the person on the other side is like, oh, this is exactly what I'm looking for. And that, I think, helps make your retreat a little bit different. Because if your retreat is going to be like the same as so many other retreats out there, then it's going to be very difficult for sure to sell. That's for sure. Well, I have the feeling that you already gave a lot of amazing tips, but is there any tip that you would give to some aspiring retreat leader, something that you think they could benefit from?
One of my favorite, thanks, Mado. I think one of my favorite tips that, Mado, we came up with this together, is if you're going to invest in somebody, invest in yourself. And I can speak to this. I mean, I have many facets to my business. As I mentioned, I have an online subscriber base. I have a teacher training. I have retreats. I have in-person series. I have private. But, there are many branches to it. I can share that I was working for, I'll leave unnamed, major corporate yoga studio. And, the pandemic happened. All the classes went online. I was working online for them, broadcasting internationally. When I stopped working for them and I started investing in myself last year, I think last year was the first year when I did my taxes where all of my income was from my own business, not from W-2 income from a corporate yoga studio or 1099 from a local yoga studio. My income went up sixfold. And so you're investing your energy however you do it, whether you freeze and you stay stuck in a freeze and you choose to just help me go to a concierge yoga retreat service that's going to pay your airfare and a small amount for you to lead the retreat, or whether you decide to hunker down and put in a little effort to build a foundation so that this can be a part of your business that you continue to grow and strengthen and make a sustainable force that you have, that you're offering. So yeah, invest in yourself, because you are investing when you choose to partner with a concierge service or do a corporate yoga. You're just getting very little back, but you're investing your same life force and your time and your energy. You're just getting very little back. And the second piece of that is to have a parachute, right? I think this is also part of that freeze cycle that Mado talked about, is a lot of yoga teachers aren't familiar with legal and financial. How do I create terms of service that are super clear and transparent and fair for my retreat guests, but also protect me? How do I ensure a deposit of 5,000 euros so that, if another global pandemic happens, I'm not out that money, or worse yet, even more if you've paid them more money. So yeah, invest in yourself and make sure that you have a parachute just in case. That would be one tip. And the second tip I'll share, just from my experience leading retreats for the past 18 years, is to commit to the concept that less is more. I think we live in a culture that packs it in. That's go, 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 do, hustle, hustle. And out of sometimes a feeling of lack, or just needing to prove that this is the most amazing jam-packed retreat experience ever, people will pack their schedule with okay, we have breakfast now, hop on the tour bus and we're going to go zip lining and then hop over here and we're going to do a jet ski and now we're going to go on a scuba diving. And it's like, whoa, it's just more of the same that people have back home. And I believe that there's a magic within yoga. And if you give it a little space, it's like back to that idea of shunyata that I shared in the very beginning. It's like a combination of faith and radiant consciousness. If you give it a little space, it will unfold in its own way and you have to trust the process. And I think that is where the most transformative magic of a yoga retreat can happen, is when you give space. You do the yoga practices, but you don't overschedule your guest experience. You give the retreat space so that the spontaneous can unfurl, so that friendships can form that might be lifelong friendships, so that people can maybe have time alone and have big perspective shifts in their life path, or subtle shifts, whatever it is, little ripples. But committing to the concept that less is more and not trying to recreate the rush and the frenzy that a lot of people live under back home on a retreat. It takes discipline to commit to that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And this is one of the pitfalls I also see with retreat leaders. And I know this comes from a good intention, because we want to give a lot and we want the experience to be amazing. But in the end, I think to have those spaces for nothingness during the retreat, they are non-negotiable. And people really need that, because what they come to the retreat, it's not to be, as you mentioned, Lily, like one activity after the other activity, because otherwise, I've been working with some retreat leaders that when I see the schedule at the first time, what they have planned, and I've been like, okay, they're going to need a retreat after your retreat. They're going to need another retreat after your retreat. I know it comes from a good intention, but I totally agree with you. It's important to have those spaces for doing nothing so that people can integrate, can absorb, and can benefit. Yeah. Mado, over to you.
Yeah, on a practical level, a way to embody that from the very beginning is to give yourself at least 2, if not 3 times as much time as you think you need to plan and organize the retreat. I guess this kind of goes back to it's not exactly a challenge, but I think it's a mistake. I think it's the biggest mistake that I see. The most common mistake I see is trying to plan and promote a retreat with not enough lead time, not enough time to really research and vet your retreat center, not enough time to do the market research of who this is for, not enough time to create a solid promotional plan where you always feel like you're catching up. And so I think a lot of people have a hard time picturing that far in the future. They're like, well, I don't know what I'm going to be doing. I don't want to commit that far in the future. But in order to give your retreat the best possible chance of being that experience of spaciousness for your students, you have to give it to yourself during the planning process.
Absolutely. That's a great tip, to give yourself enough time, because yeah, you're gonna need that, and it takes time, to find all of that information, as you mentioned, Mado, like talking to the venue, negotiating with the venue, finding out the pricings of each and every item, and so on, and then all of the marketing. Of course, it takes time. Okay, this has been a great, amazing conversation. I'm so happy that you've been so generous to share with us. If you can let us know where people can go and find you, our listeners will be grateful to connect with you. Yeah.
Mado, do you want to go first?
Sure. Well, my podcast is the Yoga Teacher Resource. You can look that up on any podcast player. You can also find me on Instagram at yoga.teacher.resource. And in my bio, you can find everything else that you might want to find there. I'd also love for anyone listening who wants to hear more in more detail about some of the concepts that Lily and I shared to check out our workshop, Thriving as a Retreat Leader, as our guest. So you can find that at helloyogateacher.com/retreats-2024. So helloyogateacher.com/retreats-2024. and use the coupon code ZEN, and you can get access to that workshop at no cost.
If you can send me those links, Mado, I'll be happy to include that in the show notes.
For sure.
And Lily, where can they find you?
People can find me. My website is lilydwyerbegyoga.com. Feel free to, I have a free first week in my virtual studio if you want to come say hi, say that you heard this podcast, come take class with us. I'd love to have you there. Also, retreats are listed there if you want to immerse in the river of yoga, get away from the grind for a week. And my Instagram is at lilydwyerbeg. And yeah, like Mado mentioned, we'd love to have you join us and take us up on that offer for the free workshop. I think it has a ton of really beneficial tips for people, whether you have been leading retreats for a long time or whether you're just getting started.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here today with me chatting. This has been so much fun. And yeah, it was great connecting with you.
Thanks for having us, Manu.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.